hog. The back of the rib is called the loin back or baby back. This part of the rib is called the spare rib, right? You guys have tried some spare ribs before. So the loin back and the spares are just the same part of the rib cage connected. They just saw this piece and use the back part, and they call it the loin back or baby back ribs. So the baby back is just a marketing term. It's not really from a baby pig. Everybody here heard of a term called Patagonian toothfish? No? Okay. If you heard something called Patagonian toothfish, you probably won't want to eat it, right? So what the marketing folks did is they renamed it Chilean sea bass. Okay? So the loin back doesn't sound very sexy, but the baby back sounds a lot more sexy. Okay? How many here like to prepare loin bags or baby bags? Okay, cool. All right, great. So what you have here is essentially a very, very tough muscle. And a loin bag requires about 3 or 4 hours of cooking in order to tenderize it. And you need to add flavor and rub to it. We have some products here, what's going to show you here. And the good thing about this class is a lot of the information is on my website. And you don't have to write it down if you don't want to. You have the bowl, you can rub it. It'll plate. I'll do it here so you can see from the mirror. Everybody can see that? That always seems so cool, right? And you can, I don't have to keep lifting up the tray and showing you guys that you can see it from here. Okay, so how do you make a basic barbecue rub? The rub is probably the most important component when you make barbecue besides the quality of your meat, right? So you want to get really good meat, right? Fresh and it's kind of like has a nice color. I usually buy my baby back ribs from either Sam's or Costco. They have great products. The brand of ribs that I used to get is a package called Seaboards, right? In America, there's primarily 5 major pork producers. And they slaughter about 425,000 hogs a day in America. That's a lot of hogs. So there's a lot of baby backs that come out. I find that the Seaboards brand or Seaboard Packing House ribs are the largest one around.
How do you know that? How do you know where they're coming from?
It's on the package. So you look at the package, it says Seaboard.
Most of the ones that we get here are Swift.
Swift, yeah. Swift is one of the top 5. There are actually about 8 different species of pigs that they slaughter every day. So the one I get from Seaboard usually is pretty big. It comes from probably a 280-pound hog, right? So depending on the size of the hog, the size of the ribs vary. When we cook competition, we try to cook with the biggest slab of ribs that we can find.
Is that way you get little real curvy little small rib bones?
Yes, it depends kind of on the hog. Some hogs are bigger and the bones are not so curved. If it's a smaller hog, then the bones are a little bit more curved.
You get a bigger hog to kind of...
Yeah, the Seaboards, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they slaughter them about 280 pounds. So depending on the producer, they have different formulas for raising hogs, and they slaughter them for different kinds of yields at different price points. So when I was in Kansas City, I met a lot of people in the hog business, so they gave me a tour and they kind of explained it all to me, which makes a lot of sense. If you're a competitor, right, you need to have a detailed understanding of your product because you're putting your product, putting the best face in front of the judges. Okay, so as I mentioned, the baby back basically comes from the back part near the spine, and they come in different weights, right? They have maybe like a 3-pounder, 3.5-pounder, 4-pounder, 4.5-pounder. So 4.5-pounder will be 4.5 down. That's the kind of industry terminology. When I go to the store, what I try to do is I try to find the heaviest rack, right? If you go to Costco, in LA, in Costco, they sell them in packs of 2. In Sam's Club, they sell packs of 3. So whatever your preference is, I always try to pick the ones that have the kind of the heaviest weight. Now, when you buy ribs, right, you got to make sure that they look good in terms of what do I mean by good, right? That means that kind of the color is even, right? There are no bulges. There's no fat pockets, right? For example, like on this slab, you can see here, right? There's some fat pockets here. So if you want to really get a great tasting rib, what you might want to do is try to trim off some of the excess fat. The other thing you also find when you buy ribs is also the thing they call shiners. Shiners are basically when the bones are showing through, right? The bones stick through the meat. You want to avoid getting those, right? What happens is they always put the shiner in the middle. So you have a pack of 3, the shiner is always wedged right in the middle. Now, the shiner doesn't mean that there's something wrong with the hog, right? Because the way these things are processed, the hog comes through the factory. The butcher has sort of a very special piece of chainsaw kind of device, and they go and they hit the carcass of the pig, and then this piece gets cut off. So if if the person is not careful, right, they end up chopping up too much of the meat, and then the bone, this kind of the bone is showing through. When you cook those, right, those don't look very good because the bone sticks through the meat. For competitors, that's almost like that. We never serve it right as a shiner. Because when the judges look at that, they'll know, oh, well, obviously this person didn't take a lot of care, look at the kind of product that they turned in. Okay? Any questions so far on what a wine bag is? Okay, now, I need to explain one very important concept of wine bags before we start making the rub is, everybody do this with your fingers. Take your fingers and twist it around, like this, right? Just twist it around, right? And when I see you next time on the street, right, what you're going to do is you're going to show me this. This is the slap your daddy gang sign. Well, really, what this means is this is something very important. I always teach my students that if you understand the physiology of protein and an animal, you can make great barbecue even with a hole in the ground. What you have here in your hand is known as a triple helix of collagen. Now, the women in this room heard the word collagen, they think, wow, expensive cosmetics. That stuff that's $100 a jar that props up the collagen. Well, collagen basically is a very tightly wound helix. And what collagen is very tough. So if you try to cook something that's made up of a lot of collagen, for example, skin and ligaments, right, and tendon, it's going to take a long, long time for you to tenderize it. Well, what happens is that wine bag, right, has a lot of collagen in it. That's why you notice barbecue is cooked low and slow. Okay? What you want to do is, when you have meat that has tightly wound collagen, such as brisket, such as pork butt, such as baby back ribs, or even spare ribs, you need to apply heat, gentle heat, to it. What happens is when you apply gentle heat, the triple helix of collagen relaxes, it gets soft, and eventually becomes something called gelatin. Gelatin is that moist, juicy, flavorful mouthfeel that you get in your mouth when you bite into a perfectly cooked rib. So the goal of cooking ribs is not to grill them, cook them hot and fast. With ribs, you have to cook them kind of low and slow for an extended period of time to let that collagen unwind into gelatin. So that concept is extremely important because I'll show you in a little bit. Once your ribs have reached a certain point in its cooking process, you need to wrap it in foil. Anybody try wrapping them in foil before? Okay, did it work? Okay, so now you understand what's happening when you wrap it in foil. When you wrap it in foil, what's happening is that you are basically braising or steaming your ribs, right? And then you're allowing the collagen, the triple helix of tightly wound collagen, to unwind into something soft and tender called gelatin. So that's the basis of all barbecue. You can barbecue a kangaroo, you can barbecue a wild boar, bison, if you understand that fundamental concept, right? So after this class, right, when you all leave, you have the knowledge to be able to survive in a desert island. If you catch an animal, you now know how to cook it. Okay, back to making a rub. I have some very basic ingredients here to make a rub. Please lay them out so you can see them.
Harry, I got one question before you start on that.
Yeah.
A lot of times I get ribs and they're not very even. Meat-wise, they get real thick on one end. And
yeah.
Is that typical, or is that because I get lousy meat?
Well, every animal is different, right? So some packers tend to put meat together that's pretty even. Some are kind of uneven, right? Like, I don't know if anybody knows Farmer John. I hope not. I don't care to use their meat because it just doesn't look good, and it doesn't have that shape that I want, right? So barbecue competitors are very particular and fussy over the shape of the product itself. Okay? Moving on to rubs, right? How do you make a barbecue rub? I'm going to teach you a very simple technique to make a barbecue rub. A barbecue rub primarily consists of 4 components, right? Very simply, the first one is something salty. So I've salt. This is just regular kosher salt, right? So we're going to mix together some salt, something salty. We're going to mix together something sweet, right? Sweet will be white sugar and some brown sugar, right? And you usually need something that has chili or some paprika in it. So we're going to use basically some chili powder. We're going to use some cayenne pepper, and we're going to use some paprika. And then the last category of the ingredient for a rub is just some spices. We have pepper and some cumin and some garlic powder. Okay? So you don't have to write this down if you don't want to. I think Wesley brought my business card here. If you have a lot of pictures also of all the different kind of dishes I've also made, because I cook a lot of other things besides just barbecue. I do paella, I do sushi, I do basically anything that's out there. I just love to cook. The proportions for these ingredients are essentially, you can write this down, 4 parts of salt, 2 parts of brown sugar, 2 parts of white sugar, 2 parts of paprika, and 2 parts of chili, and about a half portion of cayenne. Cayenne is spicy, everybody knows that, right? And for the spices, we have 1 part of garlic powder, and 1 part of black pepper, and 1 part of stew. Okay, so that's kind of a basic rub recipe. This recipe, even though I offer it on the internet, a lot of teams have used it to great success. It's really simple to do, and it's a great way to kind of impress your guests. Because I've taught you kind of the 4 basic building blocks of rub, you can vary the ingredients accordingly to put in things that you like, right? So Wes is standing behind there. Wes, can you stand and turn around and show them the recipe on the back of the shirt? Okay. And let's show them what's on the inside neck tag of your shirt. The inside neck tag is actually the rub recipe. So people think I'm crazy, right? As a competition barbecue, I do put my recipe on the back of my shirt, but we just want to share our passion with barbecue, because I always believe, right, on any given day, any team can win. And I actually put my actual recipe on the back of my shirt. My competitors, they think that it's a joke that I don't actually do that, but we do. We actually put our recipes on our shirts. Because that's how you spread happiness. Everybody walks around, chases you around, and say, hey, can I take a look at that shirt? Okay, so what we do is we empty it into a container, kind of mix it up a little bit, and we want to sprinkle that on our, like that, right here. Mix this up. Okay. Now, there's one other thing we need to do before we put the rub on. Everybody knows that on the back of a rib there is a membrane. Everybody know that? There's a membrane. When you put a rub on the membrane, right, will the rub penetrate the meat? Okay. Now, some people swear by leaving the membrane off when they cook their ribs, because when they put it in the smoker this way, the membrane acts as like a bathtub. It prevents the juices from leaking through. But I cooked it both ways, and I have to say by far it's much better when you pull the membrane off. Okay? So you can cook it if you don't want to, leaving the membrane on, but I always have to take the membrane off because I feel that the rub can then penetrate the meat.
It's easier to eat with the membrane on too.
Oh, okay, all right.
Just as a note, I was talking to the butcher at Costco here in Tucson.
Yes.
Their ribs come from Swift. There's 3 in a package, and the membrane's already pulled.
Yes. Yeah. So
Spent an hour trying to pull a membrane off.
okay. Well, maybe after this class, maybe half an hour. Okay. Okay. So how do you get a membrane off? It's pretty simple. You turn the rib over. You feel it for the bone, kind of right, the bone in the middle. Usually I use a kind of a butter knife instead of a big chef's knife like this. What you do is you want to insert the knife right where the bone is. You feel the bone here, right? You gently insert the knife underneath the membrane here. You kind of work your way through, at least to get the membranes kind of separated and started. And some people use a fork, some people use a spoon. Kind of knock yourself out. There's even a napkin. There's also a fish scale puller. Have you seen those? Right? Some people use those. So what you do is I like to get started, kind of like get a knife underneath here, right? And then flip it over, and then use a piece of napkin. Maybe not. The napkin. Now, because the membrane is very slippery, and if you try to pull it with your bare hands, it's not going to come out. So what we usually do is we flip it over, and we kind of get it started, and we basically use a napkin to kind of hold it. Can you see up here? Mirror? Okay, cool. Okay, so I'm going to try to see if I can move it around so you can see it. So I'm going to move my finger kind of underneath the membrane here, and kind of work it through with my fingers, trying not to poke a hole to the membrane. So I'm going to work my way to the other side, kind of like walking across the river, going to the other side, coming out the other side like this. Everybody see my finger on the other side? Right? Right? So what you want to do is you take a napkin, you just hold this, right, and you gently pull, and it comes out. Just like that. not terribly hard to do. And yeah, I think it makes a difference in the flavor. Okay. Now, what I like to do also at this point in time to see if there's any fatty areas. For example, I don't quite like this part here. Right? You can see here, it's really fatty. So what I would like to do is I like to kind of trim it off. The cooking process for ribs, right, is usually I like to cook ribs at 275 degrees in the smoker. And what that does is 275 renders the fat better than cooking it at lower temperatures. I cook ribs at every possible temperature as I was researching out which is the best way. I cooked it from 180 degrees all the way to 375. And for some reason, 275 is the magical temperature of cooking ribs. The idea is this. You have a compromise between rendering the fat fast enough with high enough heat. But at the same time, if you apply high heat, you burn the meat. So I find that at 225, the meat cooks slower, but then the fat doesn't render as well. 275 renders the fat well, but it doesn't burn the meat. Okay, so if you have a smoker, go ahead and use a smoker. A lot of my students cook ribs in their oven. There's no shame to cook barbecue ribs in the oven, right? If you have proper technique. The only thing is you're not going to get a smoky flavor if you cook it in the oven. But a lot of folks, they do that and you get great results. Any questions? Okay, now, on this particular rib here, you notice there's a lot of kind of sinew, and we call it silver skin. This kind of silver skin, you see me trimming it off, right? I mean, I'm one of those anal retentive people. I don't like to leave this on, and what I like to just trim it off. And you can do that if you like. There's sometimes a lot of membrane and ligaments and sinew. I prefer to trim it off. This knife is not very sharp. That's a chef's knife. You know, they always say, right, a dull knife is a dangerous knife, right? Because you're not kind of cutting something. Okay, all right. So, assuming that you know there are no shiners on this one, looks pretty good. Now we're ready to apply the rub. Now the question is how much rub to apply, right? I'm going to apply the right amount using this particular formula, and you have to decide for yourself whether it's salty enough, right? Because everybody has a different tolerance to salt. This rub is great also on a lot of things. A lot of my students, they use it on hamburgers, even scrambled eggs, mashed potatoes. A lot of them who are on low salt diet remove the salt completely, and this makes the rub without the salt component. If you mix it with brown sugar, equal parts of brown sugar, you smother it on salmon, put it on a plank, and you will grill it. You have beautiful cedar plank salmon. So this rub is very, very versatile. If you're too lazy to make it, I actually found someone who's actually selling it for me. It's a guy out of Ohio. He found me on the internet. He said, I'm a fan of yours. I noticed you don't have a rub. Can I just make your rub for you? I said, sure, why not? And I thought no one would buy the rub. In the first month we released in August, we sold $1,000 worth of rub. So I figure, I guess people are just, even though the recipes on the internet, they're just too lazy to make the rub, they prefer to buy it. It's easier and faster. Yeah. I'm sorry? All spices are not created equal. Good point. A lot of times, spices tend to lose their potency over time. So I buy most of my spices from like Restaurant Depot, from Sam's Club, Costco, because those warehouse stores have huge turnovers. A lot of the spices are very fresh. In particular, I want to mention cayenne pepper. Has a very short shelf life. Okay, most spices will last you about a year. But cayenne pepper, I change out my cayenne pepper every 6 months. And a big bottle of cayenne pepper is like $4, so it's not a lot of money. And it loses its potency pretty quickly. Now, a lot of my students, what they do, they mix this rub and then they put it in the freezer. So you can make kind of like a big batch of rub. And a lot of this stuff, really, you'll go a couple of years if you put it in the freezer. I found a lot of people, what they're doing is they're making my rub and putting it in the stocking stuffers for Christmas. So, it's an ideal way to give it to your coworkers and say, I have something to rub you with, but, they go get taken to HR. I didn't say that. Okay, so we're going to put a rub on, and you can see I'm putting on a pretty generous coating of the rub. I don't know if you can see this. This is a very important step. I don't want to tell you how much this is, because to me, it's medium. To you, it may be heavy. To some of you, it may be light, right? So if you can see that that's quite a lot of rub. Now the technique to spread the rub is you got to put it evenly, because if you don't put it evenly, some parts will not have flavor, some parts will have too much flavor, right? Always, when you make a rub, taste it first. Whenever you buy a rub, taste it first, because all rubs are not created equal. Some rubs are saltier than others. So you'll find when you taste this rub, it is pretty salty, but it really works well with this amount being applied in the meat. Any questions? Okay. The other thing you notice, when I put the rub on with my hand, I try to put it evenly, and look at my hand motion. Am I rubbing the meat? This is one of the most common mistakes of beginners. They tend to rub the meat, right? And then you end up distributing the rub. What you want to try to do is apply the rub very, very evenly. Right? You don't want to use your hand, just use the shaker. Get one of those cheese shakers from the store and shake the rub up. What you want to do is you want to press the rub into the meat. You don't want to shake it and rub it, right? You want to press it in. You want to let the meat rest and sweat. So what is sweating? Sweating means that the salt in the rub is drawing out the moisture from the rib. And after about half an hour, it'll look tacky, kind of like sticky. And that is the ideal state that you want the rib to be. And then once you have it tacky on one side for half an hour, you want to flip it over, and then season the other side, and then leave it on for another half an hour to get tacky. So what I do with ribs is I don't marinate my ribs overnight in this rub. I just let it sit and get tacky. So what I do is I do this 1 hour before I want to cook the ribs. Okay? And assuming that half an hour had passed, I flip it over. I apply the rub on the back side. Do the same thing, press it in, right? And I'll let it sit for another half an hour. At that point, both sides are nice and tacky. This will now go into the smoker or go into the oven. Question?
Do you refrigerate it in between?
You have to refrigerate. Oh yeah, obviously. You should not leave this on the counter. You should put this in the refrigerator. Right? In the meantime, or put it in a cooler somewhere. It's not. Everybody here know the 40-140 rule? Okay. If you work in the food industry, you cannot leave food out between the temperatures of 40 degrees and 140 degrees. So anything that's cold has to be kept below 40. Anything that's hot has to be kept above 140. Okay? This is important, especially if you don't want to get any food-related illnesses and problems. I think in America, there's probably, how many people in this room? Maybe 40 people in this room, right? Over the next 12 months, right, 10 of you will fall sick due to some foodborne problem. So 1 out of 4 Americans will have some foodborne problems. I believe about 325,000 are hospitalized every year due to some food problem like cross-contamination and so on. Actually, 5,000 people die. Okay, so you guys take this class and then you guys are being bombarded with requests to make those wonderful ribs, right? You want to make sure that you know how to handle your food properly. I should ask you guys, what are some of the recommended ways to thaw meat? Refrigerator, what else? Outside of the cold table. Remind me not to come to your picnic. You want the refrigerator is best, right? If you want to thaw meat, you can use a microwave also, and you can thaw it under cold running water, right? And then if you cook a slab of ribs and you want to reheat it, what is the temperature you need to reheat it to? About 165, right? You want to make sure that you heat the product thoroughly, kill any bacteria that's in it. You notice I'm wearing gloves also. This is called a Michael Jackson technique, right? I have a glove on one hand because I'm touching raw meat on this hand, right? And I'm touching the rub on this hand. I'm not cross-contaminating the two. Notice I'm not touching my hands. This hand is dirty, this hand is clean, and I'm going to basically pull my glove out after that. So, these are kind of basic practices. A box of gloves is really cheap at $5. There's 500 in there. So if you practice some safe practices, it'll help minimize any foodborne problems. And a lot of times you may go on to serve elderly people, serve young children. You want to make sure you don't cross-contaminate the food. Now, if you cook your ribs and you leave it outside, right? How long can you leave it outside in the danger zone of 40 to 140? Anybody know? About 1 hour, right? If the temperature is like right now is 92 degrees for 1 hour, if the temperature is below 70, maybe about 2 hours. Right? Now, the fortunate thing about cooking ribs is that ribs are smoked. If you smoke your rib, right? Smoke is a preservative. Remember our forefathers and ancestors used smoke to preserve meat. So most barbecue is pretty safe. So if you make ribs, you want to take it to a picnic, and you don't have a shaving tray or ice to chill it, it's pretty safe. I've not had any problems with ribs or brisket or pork butts. I don't usually like to serve chicken and leave chicken out because chicken has some related problems. It gets bad easily. You know, there's a lot of teams out there. They tend to serve ribs. They serve ribs, pork, and brisket, but not chicken. Question?
Yeah, you said you like to do that 1 hour, half hour, but when you do this, could you put it in the fridge for all night and then?
Yes, you can. You just have to be mindful that the rub, right, will end up brining the meat. I like barbecue that tastes like the animal it came from. If I'm eating pork, it's gonna taste like pork, right? I don't like it kind of completely brine and all the flavor is gone. If you eat perfectly cooked rib, you can actually taste the flavor of the animal. And I don't like to use a lot of sauce, nor do I like to use a lot of rub. I want the natural flavor of the meat to come through.
And do you use that rub for brisket? That's one.
This one is for optimized for ribs, right? For brisket, I vary the recipe a little bit. I use more oregano, more like I'm training, for now my pattern on brisket is training towards more like fajita style. And that seems to be winning. We are the #1 brisket team in the nation now in the Bonds channel, so amazingly, what I try to do is I tailor the flavor depending on the scores that the judges give me. So if I try to cook something sweet and the scores are low, I'll say, okay, let me try something else. Let me try something tangy. The scores are high, then I'll keep cooking tangy. So I'm not really married to any particular recipe or any particular flavor profile. You know, flavor profiles are kind of like fashion. 1 year is short skirt, next year is long skirt. Barbecue is the same way. When I started cooking in 2008, fruity flavors were winning. So if you made like something like chipotle raspberry was first place. You try that again in 2009, you bombed miserably. Right? In 2010, I'm finding that sweet and spicy seems to work. Right now, I'm cooking in Arizona for the first time here in Tucson. I had no idea what the judges like, so we just cook it kind of California style. I'll find out at 6 o'clock today if that works or not. Okay, any questions about trimming, selecting, rubbing the loin deck?
Do you do the backside first or the
I don't think it really matters. You know, a lot of people they like to do the backside so that when it's sitting here, the bones are kind of keeping the meat above, not touching the cutting board, so that the rub doesn't rub on the cutting board. If you want to be very retentive, you can do that, but you know it really doesn't matter. It's going to basically just sit for an hour before you cook it anyway. So
you always do baby backs and not spare ribs?
I've done both. I find that the people on the West Coast seem to like spares better. So I would say, I would make a guess that a lot of teams who cook on the West use spare ribs, St. Louis cut spares. I know there was a class earlier that you guys saw Chris do, the St. Louis spare. But the St. Louis spare has a different way of trimming and cooking. These are pretty easy, and these are easy, ready to find. In Kansas City, they tend to cook baby backs a lot, primarily because they have big hogs there. So the loin back is about the same size as the St. Louis spare, because they have really big hogs there, and the bones are really big and very straight. So, you know, they both are pretty tasty. They're both good eating. Okay, any questions? Okay, cool. So, assuming that this is now nicely rubbed, it's been 1 hour, you fire up your smoker, you fire up your oven at 275 degrees. You want to put it into your smoker, meat side up. Okay, meat side up. Now, what will happen in the smoker is that as the heat and the rub and the smoke come together, you will begin to then see something known as crust or bark. Everybody heard that term before? Right? Barbecue is about bark and crust, because the bark is the part that gives it a lot of flavor, right? Now you know that the bark is actually a special chemical reaction called the Marriott reaction, right? Have you guys heard of Marriott reaction before? Anybody here? Some French chemist in 1920 invented that reaction. Basically what it is when you apply heat and moisture and salts, you form thousands of new flavor compounds. Okay, so this is a very important concept I want you guys to come away with. When you create crust on your meat, that crust will have a lot of flavor. So you want to make sure that the temperature is high enough for you to get that crust, right? At the same time, the crust will only form where there is sufficient moisture. Very key point here. I'll say that again. The crust will only form when there is sufficient moisture. I was cooking out there last night. My neighbor, Jeff, was telling me that he wanted me to help him out. He said, how come my brisket is not crusting? I keep cooking it and cooking and cooking. I can't get a mark on my brisket. So I asked him a question. I said, do you have any water in your smoker? He said, no. So why don't you try this? Get a spray bottle and spritz it with water. Every hour or so, it's what happens. And lo and behold, this morning he told me he had great bark on his meat. Okay? So when you cook in Tucson is very dry, right? And we are at high altitude. So you cook your ribs, you want to make sure there's some moisture there. I just use a $2 spray bottle, fill it with water, and just spritz On a loin back or like this, if you cook at 275, it will crust up nicely in about 2.5 to 3 hours. Okay. Now, it's important that once the crust is established, right, that you check how set the crust is before you foil it. Okay. The way we check the crust is this is how it looks after 3 hours. So assuming this was a Julia Child episode, this went into the smoker and it came out on this side looking like this. Okay. Right. And this is how that thing looks after about 3 hours in the smoker. You notice also the size has changed, right? You guys notice that? So from this size, it went down to that size. And reason being is you're going to lose about 20% of tooth shrinkage. Right? Now, when the crust is set, right, I recommend what I call the fingernail test. Take a finger and you scratch it. Right? If the rub doesn't come off in your hand, that means that the bark has set. You want to make sure that the bark has set before you proceed to the next phase, which is to foil it. Okay? Foiling continues that unwinding of the collagen. Right now, if you try to eat this rib, it looks ready. You can try to eat it, it's going to be very tough because the triple helix is still there. The triple helix will take another 45 minutes to an hour, 15 minutes to unwind into collagen, into gelatin. Okay? So what we want to try to do now is we want to apply some sweetening agents to it, and then we want to wrap it up in foil. Now, I have basically some brown sugar I'm going to put on it. And I use a flour sifter to do this, so it's a nice even coat, so that the level of sweetness is kind of even throughout. So what you want to do is you want to put an even coating, and you want to drizzle some apple juice on it, just a little bit, maybe about one tablespoon on each side. Right? If you have some honey, you can squirt some honey. If you have some agave, you can squirt some agave if you like. So you can kind of modify the sweetness to your liking. Once you finish one side, you flip it over. Apply another coat of brown sugar to it. At this point, you can also put some butter. If you like, some people put butter. You can, what do you call agave honey, whatever you want. I just try to do it simple to give you a kind of a simple, basic recipe. And what you're doing now is you're ready to wrap it now. The important detail here is, you notice I'm wrapping it meat side down. There's a reason for that, right? When I cook it meat side up. But when I foil it meat side down. The primary reason for doing this is because you form that beautiful bark when you cook it meat side up, right? When you foil it, you put liquid, right? You want that bark to flip over and sit in the liquid. Why? Because the bark then will be soft. So I prefer bark that's soft and tender versus bark that's crusty, because I think that the bite texture is a lot better when the bark is sitting in liquid. So what we're going to do is we're going to wrap it up like this, like a burrito style, right? So just one wrap here, one wrap, and one wrap, flip it over. And this goes back into the smoker or the oven for another 45 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes, right?
You seem to be real sparingly on the apple juice, so.
Yes. I'm glad you noticed that, because that was the detail I was going to get to. What happens is I teach a monthly class, and a lot of my students always call me, hey Harry, how come my ribs don't come out like the way you did in class? I always ask the first question, how much apple juice did you put in? How much honey did you put in? And they always tell me, oh, I put a lot of that. No, you don't want to do that, because you don't want soup at the bottom of your foil, right? You notice it's 1 tablespoon on each side. Just very little. That's enough to set the sugar. Okay? You put a lot of it in there, what happens is you boil the ribs, and all that flavor and all that crust is going to come apart. So what you want to try to do is you want to do kind of like a raise with a little liquid in it. So this is enough to create maybe a small pool of liquid at the bottom of the ribs. That has a nice basting convection action. I'm sorry?
Would that be just mist them with a sprayer?
You can even spray, yeah. Sometimes what I do is I put this in a spray bottle and I spray it. Now the problem with that is that spray bottle gets clogged. And then you got mold growing on it. So I just pour it. It's easier that way. Even though those bottles are $1, I compete every week, right? And a lot of times I'm trying to cook, and I open it up, and there's mold growing on my stuff, and then just more trouble than it's worth. So I just pour it out, and it works either way. But that's a very good question. That's a very good point that you noticed. Not too much liquid, right? And then the sugar is up to you. Some people like it sweet, put more sugar. Some people like a buttery flavor. You can put some parquet or put some butter here. I use sometimes agave nectar. When I cook in cold weather, right, the honey doesn't pour. right? Because when you cook in 40 degrees, you try to pour honey, it's like stuck. So when you use agave is much sweeter than honey, and it pours in 40-degree weather. So some of the considerations if you are a competition team. Okay. So what you do is you wrap it burrito style. Now, the reason that we wrap it burrito style is for a very specific purpose. If you're cooking, let's say 10 slabs of ribs, right? You wrap it burrito style. This style of wrapping allows you to check on the tenderness of the rib individually after say 45 minutes. Because you will find if you cook 10 slabs of ribs, right? All the ribs will tenderize at different points. Some will tenderize in 45 minutes, some in 1 hour, some an hour and 15 minutes, some even an hour and a half before they become tender. So you really have to make sure that you are able to open the packet, right? And then check for tenderness. Now, how do you check for tenderness? Anybody have any favorite techniques to check for tenderness? Wriggle the bone. Okay, what else?
When you take it up, it breaks in half, it's done.
Okay, that's valid. Touch it? Okay, good. Now, what I actually do is I actually touch it with basically a blunt instrument. I actually use a garden weeder. Everybody seen one of those things? That's my secret tool. Everybody comes to my booth saying, what the heck is that? That's my tender tool. So what I do is basically when you cook the ribs, right, you take a tool and you press it between the ribs. And you close your eyes and you push. And imagine that what you're pushing is your teeth through the meat. Okay? So imagine if this was your teeth and you pressed it down and it was soft and tender, that means the rib is at the right point. You can pick up the rib also if you want, but that's when you're cooking 10 slabs of rib, you don't have the need to do that. Just too difficult unless you have a rotisserie smoker. Most of us, we cook in the oven or cook in a smoker. You have a pile of meat there. You want a quick way to check it. You just open it up and just poke it between the ribs, and you can feel and see how tender it is. Okay. Once it's tender, what you need to do is remove the rib and let it rest. I let my ribs rest for at least 15 minutes to half an hour, right, to let it reabsorb the juices. And after that, what happens is the rib tightens up a little bit. When you take a rib right out of the cooker and you slice it, right, it kind of doesn't have the full integrity. The rib kind of falls apart. So if you let it sit for about half an hour, you get a much better result. Any questions so far?
So when you take it off and let it sit, you just leave it in the foil?
You want to leave it in the foil and then you open it and let it vent. If you don't let it vent and you keep it tightly covered in foil, right, so guess what's happening to it? Cooking. So you'll be overcooked. When we compete, right, the judges are very, very particular about the texture and the tenderness of the rib. They want it to be perfect. Right? You cannot get perfect scores on tenderness if the rib is falling off the bone, because that's considered not properly it's overcooked, or when they bite into it, it's hard and it's not tender enough. The window for a contest rib is about 10 minutes. Okay? So that's why among all the 4 entries, I find that the ribs are the most fun and the most challenging to cook. People always say brisket is tough, but I think that to make perfect ribs, you need to pay attention. So if you're cooking half a dozen slabs of ribs, right, you're watching 6 individual slabs. Each slab has a window of about 10 minutes for perfect tenderness. So you really have to be on top of your game. What I do is I have a rotation system in my pit. So if I'm cooking more than 1 slab of ribs, I'll always put the one that's most tender on one side. So I always check the one on the left first. So if that one's done, the next tender one goes in that spot. That way I always make sure that I don't end up mixing up the combination of ribs. And if you have 6 racks, it's hard to keep in your head which one is the one that needs to come out first. So everybody kind of develops their own little system. Our systems work. We've won first place in ribs many times.
It's typically about another hour in the foil.
About an hour, yes. Plus or minus 15 minutes. Like sometimes it even takes longer. If the rib is very big, it obviously will take a little longer. This is pretty standard size. I think how many we had in 45 minutes? About. So yeah, we sold
In the smoker or outside?
in the foil.
Well, those ones must buy like at least an hour.
An hour, okay, an hour. So we cooked a batch of 10 ribs for you guys to try. So we did kind of a batch, and we put it in a sheet pan and we covered it and let it kind of cook for an hour. So that works too. Once you smoke the ribs and you're in the foiling stage, right, you don't really have to cook it in a smoker. A lot of my students, what they do, they like to have parties and they want to entertain. So when you cook the ribs, they're kind of all smoky and sticky and everything, and you want to put your ribs in the oven. That gives you an hour 15 minutes to shower, get all dressed up, fix the cocktails, and meet your guests. Right? And then you just run the smoker for show. We have some smoke billowing out in the backyard. I've been sitting all day, look at the smoke, right? But you come up, dress nice, and then you serve perfect ribs. So you can also do that. You can finish the ribs in the oven. There's no shame in doing that.
How do you hold the temperature prior to turning it on your ribs?
What we do is we could put it in a device called a camera, which is kind of a vertical igloo with shells in it. And we cook our ribs approximately, rib journey is usually 12:30. Our ribs come up about 11:30, and we let it sit for about an hour before turning. And as long as the ribs are kind of warm, it's fine. Because by the time the judges eat it anyway, it's not going to be hot. Because it takes about maybe 15 minutes before the judges get the meat anyway. On a hot day like this, there's no problem. But when you cook in cold weather, it's 40 degrees out there, the ribs are going to be cold by the time the judges get it. Okay? Cool. Okay, so that's essentially the rib. There's no question. I'll move on to something I want to do very quickly, which is kind of a Asian-inspired coleslaw.